Welcome back to Left, labor education for today. This is the weekly recap where we talk about the top 3 stories from the world of work this week. And yes, I'm wearing a suit this week. I just got a suit for my cousin's wedding later this month. Had to test it out here in today's video. In our first story of the week, we're going to talk about an update with the UAW, which continues its strike activity against the big 3 Detroit auto manufacturers. This week they broke with their weekly tradition of expanding strikes every Friday and have communicated to the world a new strategy that they'll be taking to help achieve their bargaining objectives. This week, UAW President Shawn Fain announced a shift in strategy as the union crosses the 30-day milestone on its current work stoppage. Until now, the union had been waiting until Friday of each week to assess negotiations progress with the auto manufacturers and then decide whether it was appropriate to expand its strike activity to additional plants and locations for those companies. This past Wednesday, however, the UAW surprised Ford Motor Company with a strike expansion at its Kentucky truck plant after Ford failed to produce a sufficient contract proposal at the bargaining table to the UAW. And this adds 8,700 additional workers to the picket lines at one of Ford's most critical plants, which produces large SUVs and pickup trucks and accounts for approximately $25 billion in annual revenue. In his weekly live stream, Fain explained that the shift in strategy to unannounced strikes at any time was necessary to amplify pressure and prevent the companies from getting too comfortable at the bargaining table, finding that these companies would often wait until the last minute on Friday morning or Friday afternoon to make progress on negotiations.
We did it the way we did for a simple reason. The companies started to wait till Friday to make substantial progress in bargaining. Ford thought they could sit back and not make further progress in bargaining because they thought they had the best deal on the table. Ford thought they could wait until Friday morning and then just make a better offer. They stopped being interested in reaching a fair deal now and only became interested in gaming our system of announcing strike expansions on Friday.
Meanwhile, the big 3 are starting to signal that they are running out of rope in terms of what they can offer to the union workers as part of these negotiations. Ford executive Kumar Galhotra said on Thursday, "We've been very clear that we are at the limit. We stretched to get to this point. Going further will hurt our ability to invest in the business like we need to invest." Meanwhile, Stellantis released 2 statements this week providing updates about the impact of UAW strike activity on Stellantis people and operations. And of course, Shawn Fain did not take kindly to this PR positioning, with Fain arguing that it's only now during contract negotiations with work stoppages in play that the companies appear to care about plant closures and worker livelihoods.
Ford's already threatening that if we demand more, they will close plants. We strike for 4 weeks and everyone loses their minds. Where were all these concerns when 65 plants were closed over the last 20 years? Why is it when they kill thousands of jobs, it's business as usual? But when working class people stand up and ask for more, it's a crisis.
Some analysts on Wall Street are actually speculating that the change in strike strategy by the UAW could signify that the parties are growing ever closer to a tentative agreement, with the logic being that a strike escalation in a surprise format at a plant as significant as Ford's Kentucky truck plant could be a last-ditch effort for the union to get company concessions when both parties are starting to realize that this thing has gone on for long enough. And an escalation of this nature could apply pressure to the company to squeeze out those last few drops, while also signaling to UAW members that the union has done as much as it can to accomplish the admittedly lofty contract negotiations objectives. Of course, all outcomes are still on the table, so we'll have to monitor for progress over the next few days and weeks to see if the parties can reach a final deal. And in our second story of the week, over 75,000 union represented workers at Kaiser Permanente have finally reached a tentative agreement with the healthcare giant this week, following the conclusion of a 3-day work stoppage that represented the largest strike in U.S. history among healthcare workers. This week, Kaiser Permanente finally reached a tentative agreement with the coalition of Kaiser Permanente unions after over 6 months of collective bargaining. And of course, both sides are pleased about the result for the over 75,000 healthcare workers that will be covered under this proposed deal. For its part, the union executive director, Caroline Lucas, said millions of Americans are safer today because tens of thousands of dedicated healthcare workers fought for and won the critical resources they need and that patients need. This historic agreement will set a higher standard for the healthcare industry nationwide. Kaiser Permanente also released a statement of its own, rejoicing that the new 4-year agreement will offer coalition represented employees competitive wages, excellent benefits, generous retirement income plans, and valuable job training opportunities that support their economic well-being, advance our shared mission, and keep Kaiser Permanente a best place to work and receive care. According to Kaiser Permanente, the tentative agreement promises to establish a new minimum wage over 3 years for coalition represented employees. That's going to reach $25 an hour for California employees, as well as $23 an hour in other states, as well as providing guaranteed across-the-board wage increases totaling 21% over 4 years. The deal also promises to enhance employee performance sharing plans with minimum payout opportunities and a substantial maximum payout opportunity. And then Kaiser goes on to say that it will increase investments in professional development and job training and includes other initiatives to help address the staffing crisis in healthcare. Following the negotiations, both sides gave thanks to Acting Labor Secretary Julie Su, who reportedly flew across the country to California to help get a deal done and was instrumental in that deal-making process. And in a statement released by President Biden on Friday, he said healthcare workers and support staff kept our hospitals and our nation going during the dark months of the pandemic. They had our backs during one of the nation's toughest times. We must continue to have theirs. I always say that collective bargaining works. It works for UPS drivers and dock workers, writers, and millions of American workers who exercise their right to participate in a union. And while the tentative agreement still needs to be voted on and ratified by voting union members, the coalition of Kaiser Permanente unions has withdrawn its notice for a November strike. And in our third and final story of the week, negotiations between striking actors and entertainment producers have been put on hold this week after both parties acknowledge that the sides are far apart on several key issues. This summer has been a summer of negotiations and labor activity for the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers. They had 3 separate negotiations that they had to get done this summer, starting with the directors, followed by the writers, and then followed by the actors. The directors were able to reach a tentative agreement with the Alliance back in June of 2023. And then, as I mentioned in a recent video, the writer's strike also came to an end very recently, with it being finalized as recently as Monday of this week. This left the Screen Actors Guild alone on the picket lines, but onlookers were optimistic that a deal was close that could bring actors back to work and could restore the full strength of the entertainment industry. However, this past Wednesday, after more than 90 days on strike, negotiations broke down between the parties, resulting in a request by the studios to pause negotiations, citing that additional talks were unproductive. According to a statement released by the AMPTP on Wednesday, the studios had offered similar terms on several important issues as the ones agreed to by the directors and by the writers. However, these were rejected by the actors this past week. On common issues such as general wage increases, high-budget SVOD residuals, and viewership bonuses, the AMPTP offered the same terms that were ratified by the DGA and WGA, yet SAG-AFTRA rejected these. And for its part, the Screen Actors Guild doesn't feel it's appropriate necessarily to copy-paste proposals from 2 other unions. The most recent and high visibility dispute between the parties is a revenue share proposal from the union that studios say would create an untenable economic burden amounting to over $800 million per year. The actors argue that the studios intentionally and grossly misrepresented the potential cost of this revenue sharing proposal to the press, overstating it by 60%. The actors went further to say in their statement this week that the studios presented an offer that was shockingly worth less than they proposed before the strike began, citing continued shortcomings in AI protections among other key issues. So at this time, no additional talks are scheduled for negotiations between the parties. However, the toll on the entertainment industry continues to accumulate. Some analysts have estimated that the total economic impact on the state of California has approached $5 billion since the onset of the summer work stoppages. And that'll do it for this week's edition of the Weekly Recap. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something, and I hope to see you again in the next video. Thanks, and take care.